are thoroughly lucky to have Andy Thompson come in to do this conversation with us, so please help me welcome him.
Well, thanks for coming. I was talking with Don. I tend to kind of wander around when I talk, and so this room kind of allows that to happen, right? So I've done this conversation or a version of it, I think 4 years now. Tucker's wife is our administrative assistant in our office, and so there's a nice connection to the Office of Student Life, and Tucker grabs us here, and I am thankful for the opportunity to be here to have this conversation. This presentation that I put together today is kind of a mix of what resources are out there that we utilize, that you all can utilize, a mix of some real life examples that we've worked with students on, and just maybe some tips and tricks or things to look for when you're working with students that are needed, and what do you do with that information once you have kind of identified, okay? So it's clearly a presentation, but if you've got questions as we go through slides, if you've got situations you're like, yeah, but what about, or Andy, this happened and I called Student Life and this didn't go well, or this really went well, let's put that out there and have that conversation. Like, I'm not, I want that to be the case. We're a small group, so let's have that discussion. Hopefully you're all here because this is an area of interest for you, or you're here because it's an area that's uncomfortable and you want it to not quite be so uncomfortable. So we'll just kind of dive in here and get going, okay? So the mission in the Office of Student Life is to enhance the K-State student experience and promote student success in the classroom and in life. I break that down to really one word, right? It's help. Like, we're here to help students out. We know that life is not smooth, life is not easy all the time, and maybe freshman year is awesome for a student, but sophomore year is a disaster for a student, right? For a variety of different reasons. And we are here to try to help the student succeed, however success is defined by that student, right? Not every student's coming here to be the 4.0 student. Not every student comes here to actually graduate from K-State, right? They come here knowing they're gonna leave the institution. So how do we help them achieve the success that they've defined for themselves while dealing with all the fun stuff that life can throw at us at times, right? So just some quick facts about our office, because I like to showcase our office. We worked with over 3,600 students last year. That continues to go up in the 5 years I've been in the office, about 200 to 300 students a year growth that our office interacts with. I personally believe that our office could serve 10,000 students. We actually couldn't, like staffing wise we couldn't, but I think there's that much issue and concern and things that are going on for our students that they could come in and get an additional resource or help. I also think that number stays low because there's faculty and GTAs and advisors and staff members on campus that are helping our students out, that come to these things, learn the resources, and solve the problem when it's down here for a student, so it doesn't necessarily have to get elevated up to us because you're knowledgeable and you help resolve that issue for them. Student of concern is a really interesting number in our office. We define that as students that are put on our radar. They didn't put themselves on it. You as a faculty, as an instructor, sent us that form and said, there's something going on for this student. And sometimes it's as low as they just haven't come to class for 3 days and they're not responding to me. Sometimes it's I heard the student had a domestic violence incident at their house and I need to make sure that they're doing okay because I'm worried about their safety, to mental health things, to the student let me know that their dad passed away last night and they're not going to be able to take this test, and I want you to make sure that they have those resources. In those circumstances, we reach out to that student proactively. And sometimes you have said, I'm okay if the student knows that I've submitted this report. Sometimes you say, I don't want them to know that. But that number, you can see, was an increase of over 200 reports from the previous year. The previous year to that, it was an increase of 100. So in 2 years, we've nearly doubled those reports. And I don't think it's because our students are having more issues. I think that as a campus community, we're more in tune that there's resources available and help functions available, and we're more willing to say, hey, I know the student needs help, can you help them out? And so I think that's great, right? We are on track to go above that again this year. Okay, we're just so you know, I think we had like 80 of them last week alone. Okay, it's mid-semester, so September, October is where our student issues really skyrocket, our mental health issues skyrocket. It's why that whole fall break conversation, we were really pulling for it, because I will argue with anyone that that is a necessary thing for our students. That's not going to happen for us, which is sad. And as a campus community, we're going to have to think through that a little bit, how we're serving our students, because the mental health and the stress isn't going away for us. It's just elevating and continues to go up. So just know that. So our office staff, there's 4 deans in our office. Heather Reed, myself, Laurel Moody, and Justin Frederick. We break our workload down by academic college. So if a student calls us or you call us, depending on what academic college they're in will determine which dean they work with. So for myself, I work with arts and sciences, M through Z in the alphabet, okay? Justin takes the front half of arts and sciences. I also have the College of Health and Human Sciences. Justin has the College of Ag, Laurel has education, business, engineering. Heather takes all of our graduate level programs, so that's gonna encompass our vet med program, our AP design program. Global campus, we still break it down kind of by the college that they sit in. You don't need to remember that because our front desk is going to know that and kind of divide that up for us so that we can establish those relationships with our colleagues in those colleges, as well as the deans in those colleges. Carolyn is our student life coordinator. She tackles all of our student of concern reports. So that comes in, Carolyn gets it, Carolyn's the one doing the initial reach. Carolyn's the one doing a quick assessment to say this is a health and safety thing. We need to call the police. We need to call housing. She's going to work with us as deans and say, hey, this is what just came in. What are we going to do with that? So she's really keeping the pulse of kind of our elevated student crisis piece, okay? And then I always put this on here because I think it's important to know. Part of the student fees and priv fee that they pay pays for an attorney that is free for our students to use. So if you have a student that's ever sitting with you that says, I got an MIP in Aggieville last week and now I have to go to court and it's really stressing me out, I don't know what that's gonna look like, to I have a landlord that's just not treating me right, or I think they're not following the lease, or they're not fixing things like they should, they can come meet with Sarah Barr free of charge, and she's gonna talk through what that can look like for them. For our lower level legal issues, Sarah is the go-to person. Couple things just so you know where Sarah can't help. If it's a student against another student, because obviously that'd be a conflict of interest for her to represent both. If it's a student against the university in some capacity, because the university pays her, so that would be a problem. And just those elevated level of cases. Now a student can come in and say, this is what's going on, and Sarah will say, here's some attorneys in town that I think would be a good connection point for you, and point them in the right direction, but she's not going to be able to actually represent them through that, okay? So as we dive into the rest of this, there's just some items I want you to keep in mind today. Life happens, and it usually happens at the worst time, right? It's gonna happen when you got 3 exams or a major paper that you procrastinated on and you need some time to get away, right? We all know that kind of occurs, right? I'm living that currently, right? I have a paper in a class that's due or a project that's due, and I've gotta go out of town for 4 days, and I had to email my professor and be like, yeah, I know, not good, but so I haven't learned from my own life experiences, but it's gonna happen at bad times. I want you to keep in mind to try to meet the student where they are. One of the single greatest pieces of advice I got in grad school was from Dr. Jerry Neal. Dr. Neal was an 82-year-old, balding, Southern white man who he did a full career, retired, and said, you know what, I want to go be a full-time counselor. So he went back, got his counseling degree, started his own practice, and became a professor when he was like 75, right? And Dr. Neal's advice was, if that student's hardest moment in their life is that they broke up with their partner of a month and they are crushed, and sitting in that counselor chair that this really isn't that huge of a deal in the scheme of life, that's the greatest hurt they've ever experienced, right? So that's their level of this is horrible. Now, 20 years down the road, they're going to look back and go, that's not that level of a horrible because there's a lot more we know. But their level of hurt in that moment may be equal to the level of hurt that you had when your mom passed away. So feel that and know that and meet them in that place. And if you take it there and get out of this isn't a big deal, you'll bounce back mindset, and know that for them, this is a huge deal, I think it changes how we have a conversation with one another. Grace and understanding go a long way. We know students aren't perfect. We all aren't perfect. And we know sometimes that there's just things when people aren't carrying their weight. But what I'm asking is that there are moments where there are things impacting them that are causing them to not be able to carry their weight or focus or show up to class and be engaged. So try to keep that in mind. Students are more than just in your class, right? Like, this is an academically rigorous environment. And there are classes that I look at and I'm like, I don't know how you're doing the one, let alone the other 4 that you've got on top of it. And so I always say to students when I email faculty, I'm like, you need to go have a conversation with them about getting caught up, about what this looks like, but you can't just look at it from Don Saucy's class, right? You've got to look at what Don needs, and you've got to look at what this professor needs and what Tucker needs, and all around the room, and then assess it from there. And then we've got to pull back in and say, are there classes we need to withdraw from? Are there classes you can do an incomplete? Are there classes you need an extension? But I ask you as instructors working with students that you also keep that in mind, that it's not just your 3-hour class or 4-hour class. There's 15 to 18 hours for these students most of the time that they're looking at and trying to juggle. Think outside the box. If you can, think creatively when we're working with our students. I recognize I'm standing up here in an idealistic place of like, let's just help our students, knowing that there are just sometimes the lab gets set up one time a semester and that's the only time it's set up and we can't make an exception. I get it, right? And I explain that to students when I'm like, if you go to a professor and they say they can't, they legitimately maybe can't, right? That's a legitimate thing. And I know that, and we share that with our students that we're working with. And it's okay to say that to a student and just be direct with them. But if you can think outside the box, if there's things you could do, if it's I'll give you an incomplete in the next semester when we do that lab again, come back and complete this lab and then we'll get your grade squared away. I had a professor do that and I was like, oh, that's kind of brilliant. We should keep that in our back pocket. And then just pay attention to your students, right? Some of you teach huge classes and knowing all of your students, all 200 of them on a personal level just isn't gonna happen. But if you follow those patterns, they came to class, now they don't. They turn in really well done assignments and now it's just crap or it's late. Those are kind of some of the patterns you can follow. So those are some things that I try to practice. I'm not perfect at it, but that I want you to keep in mind today as we move forward. I've got a quick video here, Tucker, if you wanna. It's about a 2-minute video. So that's Brene Brown, right? And so she's, if you haven't listened to any of her stuff, like I think she's got a lot of really great material to kind of dive into. I share that, not saying that you need to be empathetic with every single one of your students, but if you've never tried to come from that place, to give it a go, right? Again, knowing that we can't solve every student's problem, but we can try to be helpful in the moment. Or we can deliver that bad news message of I can't help you, or that's not gonna work out right now, from a place of empathy, so it doesn't land quite so ugly and quite so like this professor doesn't care about me, right? So that's just my challenge for you as you're working with students to think back through that, to think through those moments, to think through it's uncomfortable to just sit with someone that's had like a crappy thing, right? Like we are designed to like problem solve to help, right? Now I get to sit in a seat where I do get to problem solve after we kind of work through that, just being there. I can't tell you how many students I work with that I sit down and I go, the way you're feeling is justified. You should be feeling this way. This is hard. This is a challenge. If you weren't feeling this way, I'd be concerned for you. And to just watch the relief in a student's face when I say other students deal with this too. It's gonna be okay, you'll get through the other side of it. To watch the relief and the letdown in their body of like just this weight come off their shoulders to be like, okay, it's normal. I can do this, this is okay, right? And then we problem solve, or then we work forward to that next thing. But just, there's so much I think of like a lack of confidence in a student, or a crisis of confidence of can they be here or not be here facing these issues, and is it unusual that they're facing these issues and struggling? Why am I not just picking myself up and going? Well, because your brain's not firing a correct chemical and you're just not gonna be able to do that right now, right? There's lots of reasons. So recognizing a student in crisis. A lot of this stuff, I think, requires that paying attention piece that we talked about previously, right? As your students come in, how do they normally look, right? So like, there's a difference between like the freshman year scruffy beard and the letting yourself go because you've just stopped and you're not showering and you're not in a good place. And there's a difference between you wear pajamas to class and that you haven't changed your clothes in 4 days, right? And I think paying attention to what that looks like. Procrastination, if it's a change, right? Like I procrastinated my entire life as an academic, right? I hate it about myself, but I can't seem to break it. Versus they always turn their stuff on time and now it's a super procrastination, right? What's going on? Like, why is this paper late? Why do you need that extension? Why isn't this work good? Well, my grandma passed away. Okay, right? There's your root, right? I think so much about what we're doing with students is trying to get to what the root issue is that's causing some of this stuff. My challenge to you is, if your sibling were sitting in front of you exhibiting the same behaviors, assuming you have a good relationship with your sibling, okay? Would you just let them go on their way and not ask them about it? Right? If it was a personal close friend or family member and you would engage and care, then you should care in the moment with that student. And sometimes the care in the moment is filling out a student of concern report and passing it over to us, right? That's okay. If you've got 500 students in your class, you probably can't do that with all of them. But letting them know you may do that, or just asking that how's it going question and letting them know you care, I think is the big part. So here, I'm not gonna talk through all these things because I think some of you can know like, oh yeah, I can think of a student, that's what that looks like. And every time I do these presentations for faculty staff, I end up with a bunch of SOCs that day, right? Because you go, wait a minute, like that's my student in my Psych 101 class, right? So how do you assist them? Build that relationship, on that established relationship. Relate your observations to them. They know what's going on. You look tired. You haven't slept for 2 days. I'm stressed, I have anxiety, like it's not good. Like have a very real conversation with them. It's not a scary place to be. The normalizing, meet them where they are, letting them know that it's okay to be feeling that way. What I say to students is the biggest step of knowing you're an adult is when you can raise your hand and say, hey, I need help, I'm not doing good, right? Watching freshmen, like their eyes go, whoa, when I say that to them, I'm like, no, you need to ask for help. It's not cool to not ask for help and then fail out of college. or self-harm or worse, because we know we deal with that, right? Make those referrals. Academic dean office, office of student life. Talk to them about counseling services, about the family center. If they're in housing and dining, encourage them to talk to their RA, their community coordinators. Help them understand, because sometimes students just don't even know that the help's out there. And so you all being here is helpful, and we're going to talk resources in a little bit so you get a little bit more. And then it's also about taking care of yourself, right? Like teaching large classes or small classes, teaching is hard, right? It is hard. Working at an institution is difficult, and we all don't always practice the best life balance, right? And we've got personal stuff going on, and we have to stay in check about what that looks like too. Like it's just as important for us to let our supervisor know if we're not in a good place, or to take our mental health day, or to go see our therapist if we need to. So keep in mind that you need to be paying attention to what's going on for you. So a little bit more about the student of concern. So if you go to our website, there's a link to a form. You can fill that out anonymously. You can check that you just don't want the student to know, but if you're the only one in the world that knows the information, the student's probably gonna put 2 and 2 together that you submitted that form, and that's okay. We are going to reach out via email once, and we're gonna write back to you and say, hey, thanks for the report, we've done a reach. Okay, if it's kind of low level stuff, and you can mark it as low, intermediate, or high. On a high SOC, every dean in our office gets that email. So Sunday night at 9 o'clock at night, we had a suicidal student one come across. I think like 3 of us had seen it, and we all communicated with each other and said, who's making the call, who's doing whatever, okay? If it's high where you fear for like the safety of a student, you can fill this out for us too, but you probably just wanna go ahead and call the police, right? Because that's what we're going to do. And so I think that's the important part. But if it's kind of lower level stuff, you can get it to us. We'll do the reach. A couple days later, if we don't hear, we'll do a phone call. And then we'll ultimately, if it's a health and safety thing, we can send the police, we'll send housing and dining staff. We'll do more active engagement. In the meantime, that student may have had another class with you. So now all of a sudden the student comes in and you're seeing them. What I would love for you to do is to say, hey, could you stay after class for a minute and just do a quick check-in? Hey, I think, I submitted a report to Student Life. Have they reached out to you? Yeah, I just haven't responded. Because our system, we know if they've opened the email or not. So Maxient is the system we use. Maxient is a good email from us, right? It's not spam, but it does ask the student to put in their WID, and as soon as they put in their WID, it tells us the time down to the second and the IP address that they open that email. So we know if an SOC's responded or not, right? It's not a mystery to us, like, oh, I wonder if they got and they're ignoring us, versus they just didn't check their email. And sometimes your SOCs they're not responding to email, which again is the phone call. Sometimes we call parents, we kind of go that route. There's a student of concern guide on our website. This is just the form, super quick and easy. There's a student of concern guide on our website. If you want some more specific tips and tricks on certain issues that are going on, how do you ask those questions? What are your direct resources you can do? We update that every year. We used to send out a folder student of concern guide. That's A, expensive, and B, really hard to update. So now it's all online. Last year, everyone should have gotten a new postcard that said, hey, this is online now. The second paycheck of every semester, we send all new staff members the postcard to say, hey, this process is out there. So if you have more details and more specifics about what issues, how do you tackle it, who do you address it to, our guide is online. It's written for you all as faculty, staff of the university. That's who this guide is written to. Obviously, students could read it and apply it to their fellow students. One thing you'll interact with us quite a bit is on absence notifications. Our hope with absence notifications is that they're designed for those extreme situations. So a student can say, something's happened at home and I have to go. They can call us and we will email all of you on their behalf. They're copied on it. They need to follow up with you. But so that some of that communication, A, we're vouching for it because we require documentation, but then it just helps with that communication piece so that student can go be where they need to be, right? If you all got a phone call right now that a loved one of yours was in a medical emergency, you just are gonna wanna go, right? So we wanna help them be able to do that. Other times we might do that as a student comes in and says, I haven't gotten out of my bed for 3 weeks. My depression medication ran out. I just can't get out. We're going to talk through, well, what resources are you on? Well, I'm getting back on my meds. I've started therapy. I've done whatever that needs to look like. And we're gonna write to you all. And that's that situation where we say the student's going to come talk to you about where they stand in your class. And missing 3 weeks of a class in some classes just is no longer doable, right? It just isn't. And it's okay to say that, right? But I challenge you, have we thought through all the potential options, right? And if you have and it's just not doable, okay, that's fine. There's retakes, there's withdrawals, there's incompletes, we take it the next semester, we just take the hit on the grade and do the grade replacement, whatever. There's options there, right, that we have to talk to the student about. But I say to students all the time, we need to operate in the no, not in the what if or the unknown. So let's just go get it. Let's get our menu so we know what we need to order on how we need to go forward, right? I said, my job isn't to pick what you eat. It's just to tell you what's all available to eat. And then you got to choose how you eat it and how it's cooked and all that good stuff, okay? So some reporting things that are important. As university officials, and in most of your capacities, you can't be confidential. So if a student reports things around Title IX, so sexual assault, sexual violence, sexual harassment, dating, domestic violence, stalking, you do have to make a report on that. And if you get that information, if a student just kind of comes out before you can stop them and inform them that you're not confidential, those reports have to go through institutional equity, or they can come over to us and we will forward them over to institutional equity for you. If a student starts to say to you, there's something that happened really bad, it was really bad, and I'm not handling it well, and I don't know how to move forward, and you can pause them and just inform them of where you sit at the university, and that, hey, there's gonna be certain things you tell me that I can't keep here. CARE, how many of you know about CARE? Okay. Center for Advocacy, Response, and Education, they are our confidential office around those 5 things, right? Sexual violence, harassment, dating, domestic violence, and stalking. And a student can go tell them. CARE is a fantastic resource. They've got some additional resources with the grant funding they have. If a student needs some additional counseling, they have a fund that'll pay for that. If a student thinks they need a protection order, and it doesn't have to be a protection order against another K-State student, it could be someone in the community or back home, CARE will go down to the courthouse with them and take however long that needs to take to get that protection order filled out and submitted, and make sure we get it over to our police so that they're aware that it's on the books. And they're confidential, right? So they can tell the student. The relationship we have with CARE is that if a student goes to CARE and says, my academics aren't doing well, this happened, and for the last 2 weeks, I've been really spotty, CARE will email us and just tell us that a student's experienced something. No details, no anything. It doesn't trigger anything for us. And we will send our usual faculty email, something's going on for the student, can you work with them? So it's coming from us, just like our absence verifications, our general struggle emails, all those good things. How many of you got an email from us? Yeah, good. But so a student still gets their resources and their support, but it's still sitting in that confidential camp where they still have control over what needs to happen, okay? So some resources for you all to be aware of as you're working with students. Academic Achievement Center, and many of these sit in the University Success Center, which is really centralized in Holton and Holtz Hall, but does encompass, offices all around campus. But University Success Center. The Academic Achievement Center is on the first floor. Any student on this campus can get an academic coach. So if you have a student that's struggling with time management, really anything that's just kind of like a skill that they're going to need to be successful here, they can go in there, sign up for a coach. The coach meets with them for 3 to 4 sessions and skill builds. So that time management isn't still hitting them senior year. Right, they kind of get it squared away freshman year or sophomore year, or whatever year they are. That is free, and like I said, any student can utilize that program. Student Access Center, I bet we're all aware of, works with our students with permanent and temporary disabilities. So I think our students with permanent disabilities are pretty well aware of Student Access Center and utilize it quite a bit. That temporary disability I think is really important. So if you have that student that's broken their leg and now they're on crutches and they have classes from like back to back to back, Student Access Center will come pick them up and take them to their next class so they don't have to be late. I think part of that's just letting those students know that that office exists and that they can utilize that service. You know, obviously we know testing, accommodations, all that good stuff out of that office. The Fiend Health Center, full medical center. There's x-rays, there's physical therapy, there's a massage clinic, there's a women's clinic. So I encourage students to utilize that facility. One of the things I also say to students is you are living in Manhattan for 9 to 10 months a year now. And for some of you, you will move to Manhattan and you won't ever move back to your hometown. So if you have some place that you have to go weekly or you need to get medicine refilled, why not go where you can walk 10 minutes to it as opposed to driving 2.5 hours and driving 2.5 hours back, and now you've missed a whole day of classes versus squeezing it in between classes. So that's a message. Obviously, we know there's specialists in certain relationships that you need to keep, and I get that. But if you can move it to the community you're living in, could be helpful. So that's something to be aware of. Financial assistance, college is expensive, rent's expensive. That just kills students, I think, right? Like it just, when you owe money to somebody or don't know how you're gonna pay your next bill, it leads to the mental health issues, it leads to the fact that they're not focusing in classes. And so get them to us, get them to financial aid. PowerCat Financial can talk about budgeting if a student just isn't good with their money. The Proud campaign, so if a student has kind of a one-time thing that comes up and they need money, the Proud campaign is somewhere that students raise money for other students and give out up to $2,500 to kind of get them over the hump for that one-time need. And that's through financial aid. Counseling services, 4 free sessions a year for students. They also have group therapy that does cost $7 a session. For some situations like that group therapy, that normalizing, that helping each other with your peer kind of mentality is really important. So I would also add to that the Family Center does really good work for our students, and the Family Center can be used by K-Staters but also community members. So if there's something going on or like a partner situation and one's not a student, the Family Center can see them over there. There is a cost with that, but it's on a sliding scale, so it's pretty low for our students. Really great success with both of those locations. Care we've touched on, legal services is Sarah Barr that we've touched on, PowerCat Financial got, and then Cat's Cupboard. You know, a couple years ago, I think we did a survey where I think 39% of students said that they skipped a meal because they couldn't afford it. That, when you think of the size of our campus, and that 39% of students reported they skipped a meal because they couldn't afford it. Talk about the financial stress. If you're hungry, are you focusing? Right? Not at all. You're not firing on a good place. So Cat's Cupboard being available to students. And now they will do faculty staff too. So that's in the basement of Fairchild. Students go in, they swipe their card just for like demographic information so we know it's being used and how we're utilizing its services. They can go as much as they want. They can go every day and pick up their food, okay? Now, Cat's Cupboard may pay attention a little bit and say, okay, what are we doing to try to mitigate that situation? But they're not, I mean, we're not publicizing what students are using it or anything like that. So that is being used. If you have student organizations that you're aware of or community organizations, donations are always welcome. They have an Amazon wish list that they keep up to date on the items they really are needing. And you can go onto the Cat's Cupboard Amazon wish list, order it, and it'll get delivered to Cat's Cupboard. So that's something where we can kind of give back as a campus community in that regard. Do we have questions yet? Yeah.
So I was given information yesterday from one of my students that another student in class might be stalking him. So I mean, I didn't see his phone to be able to verify that because a lot of it's happening over social media. And so he feels as though it was a lot of unwanted attention. And so, and I guess before you presented the slide about the Office of Institutional Equity, I guess I wasn't completely aware that I would have to tell him that I was a mandatory reporter in
Sure.
that way. And so there's a lot of like moving parts with this situation, but he may or may not be staying in my class because of that situation.
Okay.
So is that still something that I need to disclose to the office because another student is exhibiting possible stalking behavior?
Yes. Yeah. So for people on the video, the question was just yesterday, she had a student report that he feels like he's being stalked by another student in class, right? And what should happen with that information and how do we support that student? In that situation, I think you have enough information that you need to make a report. You can start by calling us and we can have that conversation and get a little bit more information. You also, if you wanted to, could reach back out to the student that came to you with that information and say, here's kind of process-wise where this needs to go. And for support and safety and all of those things. Because if we have students that are stalking other students or doing bad behavior, we need to take a look at that and assess if that's what kind of safety issue do we have going on here. I don't want a student to withdraw from a class because they fear for their safety. If there might be other accountability things that need to happen. So you and I can chat after this if we want. But yeah, that is certainly something that you would want to pass up and address so that we can address that issue, because we can't have, like, that's not a super awesome situation for that student to be involved in. And with the other student that's participating in that poor behavior. Now, something to keep in mind, a lot of our policies are on campus only or university sponsored activities. Okay, social media gets a little funky because this kind of depends on where that is being sent from and occurred. But like threatening situations, we do have a little bit broader reach because threats can come onto campus really easy. And we just need to be able to have that information so we can actually assess it and look at it and help support that student, right? Sometimes there's situations that are going on that as an institution, we can't hold someone accountable to, but we can still try to provide those resources to make it feel a little bit better for that student, right? And sometimes maybe that's, I don't know if in this circumstance, sometimes that's changing to a different section, right? We're having a conversation of if two students aren't getting along and they don't want to see each other, but that's the only class or that's the only time those classes meet. Like, well, you go in the north door, you go in the south door, you go up to the second floor and leave right after class, you just go into the first, like we can work some of those sort of things out. We'd really have to look a little bit more at that situation to make sure that it's not a broader kind of context. So we can talk more. Okay, good. Any other questions? Yep.
How long does it typically take for us to receive the notification, like once a student contacts you and says, hey, there's an issue, before we get that notification?
We try to get it out. For me personally, when I'm sending them, I try to get them out within the 24 hours that I meet with the student. We're all busy, right? Like yesterday I met with 10 straight students. I sent emails for 5 of them. So just finding the time to like craft that and get that. That's not.
I had a student on Monday say they were gone last week because of a family issue, and I haven't received anything yet. Should I assume that that student has not reached out and I should?
He may not. You could, yeah. Or I mean, you can always call the office and ask Carolyn and say, hey, I know this student, I sent them over here. Have they made contact? Okay. And then we can tell you like, no, they actually haven't yet. Or yep, they're meeting with Justin on Friday. Okay. Right. Thanks. So we try, if a student were to call like on Monday, we try to get them in by like Tuesday or Wednesday. We don't typically do same day appointments just because our schedules are that full. Something to know, Monday through Thursday from 2 to 5, one of us holds that time for emergency walk-ins. So if you have a student that you're talking to and it's a kind of a crisis, we got to get you in with someone right away, walk them over to our office. We have someone available to take that appointment. If it's 10 in the morning and they're in crisis, walk them over, right? Like we'll shuffle, like we'll make it work. But sometimes it could just be a couple days, and sometimes students maybe just hadn't quite followed through yet. And so, but yeah, call our office. We can confirm like, sure, yeah, they coming in, or nope, haven't heard from them. Maybe you just decide, okay, I'll just do another reach and kind of guide them a little stronger, or you want to do an SOC.
So that prompted another question.
Yep.
I'm sorry for monopolizing. Nope. But you mentioned that if they're like in crisis, that we can go to you. I've been using the counseling
Sure.
center.
Well, I
Trying to get them in like that day.
it depends on how we're defining crisis, right? Like, so if it's a mental health, it's a therapy crisis, yes, roll the counseling. Great. If it's they're overwhelmed because there's just a lot of personal stuff going on and there's some, like, sometimes with students, like this root issue is causing so much stress, it's funneling this way. And if we can resolve this,
Sure.
then this trickles down and is no longer a crisis therapy situation,
Gotcha.
but it's a crisis like problem solve situation. So part of that's your judgment. If you walk them over to us and we're like, oh yeah, we got to get them to counseling, we'll put them on the golf cart and we'll go over to counseling. So yeah, good clarity. Yeah.
So I have more of a kind of general question. I've gotten an email oftentimes where someone will say, you know, Tucker's having an issue right now in this time period. Anything you can do to help out is appreciated. And I'll have no idea what to do with that. But
Sure,
the
good.
student will come to me and said, student life said everything's going to get fixed now.
Mm.
And in that period of time, a student has taken an exam, not done very well, and these kind of things. And the student said, but I can retake the exam. But no, that's not really what that communication said. So I'm kind of wondering, when we're given that notification, what should we do?
Yeah, so I'm so glad you brought that up, right? Because I would like to tell you that every single email I send is individualized, but there's a lot of formness to it that we try to individualize when like really appropriate. Yeah, that's a super vague email to get. I recognize that, right? Like, this student's just been struggling for 2 weeks. Can you help them out? I know that. Part of the issue or the reason why we send that kind of more blanket generic one is because it's going to every professor. Right. And I've had professors that have called me and said, well, why didn't you talk to me first so that you could give a realistic expectation to the student? I'm like, we emailed 14,000 professors last year. Now you might've been 100 of the 14,000. Like, it's just not realistic for us to call every professor on every student I would have had to do 35 phone calls yesterday. Like, that just wasn't going to happen for the student. So what we communicate to a student is, we're going to kind of vouch that something's been going on for you. You're going to have to work out the details with your professor. We never say to a student, you're going to get to retake an exam. They're going to waive it to a 0. They're going to do this. We say, you have to go have that conversation so that they're aware and that they know that you're just connected with us. So I want everyone to hear, when I send something out, there's not an expectation. It's just, we're trying to be helpful for the student to start that conversation. And my hope when you get that email is that you go, okay, they're not just a slacker student that's not doing something. There seems to be something going on. Could I let them retake it? Or is it we drop that but average the other exams? Or if there's something that could be done, could we do it? Like, for me, I just hope it opens the door to that possibility. Whereas I think sometimes if it's just a student saying I'm struggling, that door may not be open yet, right? So I'm just hoping it opens the door for consideration. The easier ones are really when it's like, this student was out of town for a funeral, right? Because then you go, okay, I vouch for that, they missed the exam, they're out of town, I've got this, right? It's those broader ones where it's like, well, something happened here and it's just spiraled because the student didn't handle it quite as well. And now we're trying to pull them back and give them 2 legs to stand back up on. And we never say to a student, this is going to make it all better, right? This doesn't mean I expect Don to give you an A in the class. Maybe instead of an F, though, you have a possibility at passing. So does that?
Yeah, it does. I mean, I'm glad you brought up that other case. Missed work is almost always easier to handle than work that was done during the struggle. And it's just, sometimes I think students hear different things or expect different things.
You're right.
I feel very, very powerless sometimes when a student has not performed well.
Yeah.
And then I can find out they've been in struggle. And I really don't have an easy solution to expend in this situation.
Yeah, we'll have students that'll call and you all can just get on me if this is way off. But a student called and said, this is going on for me and I'm not in a place to take the exam because this information just came to me. And I will say to a student, you need to do what you need to do, but it's easier for you to take an exam that you didn't take than to get a second go at it on material you've already seen, right? Professors are not super keen to do that usually, I don't think. I'm getting some nods. But then there's the risk, because professors don't have to listen. You guys don't have to listen to what we say. There's nothing in your policies that say if student life emails you, you have to do what we say. right? And I do have some folks that don't. That's fine. It's not fine. I don't like it. But it is what it is, and I understand that, right? But I just hope that, you know, that whole like promise of support, it is truly a campus community thing. And we use the word family, and we know family has some really ugly side. Let's just own that. But in the family, we try to do what we can. Sometimes it's not always everything. But yeah, I think you're right. It's difficult. And if you ever have a question on a letter, call me. I love talking with you all because you know what it does? It helps me be better, right? It helps me go, Don brought up a really good point. I should word that differently, or I should do this differently. So pick up the phone and ask me. And maybe I can give you more context on the phone. Then you go, okay, I see why that didn't go in the email, but that's helpful for me. And a lot of this we say to the student, sharing the actual context with your professor could be helpful, but that's your story to tell. I'm not going to tell it necessarily.
I want to add one more thing. So one of the things that I was very surprised to hear recently, and noted in here, and I don't know if anyone caught it, is the university does not have an attendance policy. So there are no valid excuses. But
outside of pregnancy.
So faculty senate is working on this stuff. So what we hope is that very soon we will actually have a university attendance policy, but there are some absences that are university-based. Right now, there are none that are universally excused except for.
Yeah, there's a couple of federally protected things we have to do. Yeah.
So I was very surprised to know this.
Yep.
But hopefully it's going to be corrected.
Yes, and we met with some faculty senate folks and put our 2 cents into that. So yeah, you're right. I'm glad you pointed that out.
I have a lot of student issues every semester.
Yeah, sure.
Let me just.
Yeah, us too.
So this is a little bit connected with what Dr. Saucier said earlier, but as far as like, when it seems as though students are trying to like retroactively impact something. So like I had a student last year who I have like participation requirements and just like really didn't actively participate, but then kind of threw like a Hail Mary pass at the end of the semester of like, well, I have anxiety.
Yeah, love that.
And I'll get a physician's note.
Yeah.
And so I have an expectation that now you're going to keep that in consideration for my final grade.
Right.
That's not legit, right? Like I can't be forced to retroactively grade somebody on something.
I mean, you can't be forced to do anything with that, right? Yeah, I mean, you can't. And we refer to them as Hail Marys, like Dead Week and Finals Week. Some of those, I mean, there's like a percentage that are truly legitimate, right? There are a ton of students that you all don't see that come to us that we are just like, no, we're not vouching for that. So I think it's a balance to like sort through what that looks like. I mean, sometimes I go, well, if it's a legitimate thing, do you waive that chunk of participation points and just adjust kind of how the percentage hits, right? It's so situational to throw that out. But no, I've had anxiety all semester, and now I have a doctor's note. Like, we will say to a student, well, the next semester you've got to come in sooner, right? You've got the doctor's note, just come in. We can be proactive on that front. Yeah, I don't know a good answer to that situation because we deal with it too, and we try to work honestly with professors and students to say that's not going to be a thing right now, but you get 5 retakes to replace your grade, right? Know that. Let's do this better next time. And the conversation comes from that place of support and education while their grade's taking a hit. Yeah.
I have a question. I've received a couple of letters from the office of student life.
Yeah, sure.
Students,
yeah.
Right? And one of the final sentences in all of them was, it's on the student to get with the faculty member.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the issue is placed with that.
Yeah.
So I had an issue where a student sort of threw a Hail Mary, but it was more legit. They'd broken their leg a week or 2 before finals. Got a letter from y'all, please excuse the student for this week.
Yeah.
But not finals week.
Yeah.
Literally midnight before our final.
Yeah.
I got an email. Yeah, still not feeling it. My leg still hurt, not coming. Then, I mean, not even signed, but like deal with it. Say, okay. The OSL letter does not include finals week, but I gave them the benefit of the doubt, gave them incomplete.
Right.
Okay. Final letter, or the sentence in your letter, on the student to engage me.
Yeah.
I have not re-engaged that student. They have incomplete that will revert to a failure at the end of this semester. I have not engaged.
No, you don't. I mean, you don't.
Right.
I think it comes down to when I'm going to skip all these because we're running out of time. And Carolyn said, you don't need extra slides. You talk too long. She was right. I think for me, what it comes back down to is like, think outside the box, think from that care perspective. What I would love you to do, and this is me not teaching in a class, is if you kept track of your incompletes and the ones you hadn't heard from, just like April 1st, hey, got incomplete from last semester. Just know if I don't hear, you're running out of time to finish this. And if I don't hear from you, it turns to an F, right? That to me kind of checks this box of like, boy, you've gone above and beyond, right? But not to the point where like, I think it's a huge distraction to you. But no, you don't have an obligation. And if that flips to an F for that student, it does, and that's a learning moment. Right? There are like, there's crappy learning moments, right? And sometimes there's like crappy things that come from that. So I think that would be one of those situations. If a student comes in and says, well, you had 5 months. Where were you? Yeah.
This was last spring.
Oh yeah, geez, yeah. So no, not an obligation. I think it's just how you as a professor feel you want to sit in that world. Yeah. I want to keep them for questions because we've got like 6 minutes. So I'm just going to keep this up there because I think that's important. Tell me, where are we at? Are student life way off here? Does it feel okay? Is our relationship with you all working? I appreciate the question on the generic email. I hate sending the generic email, but so many situations are that, right?
Oh, and I understand.
Yeah.
I'm just kind of wondering, what do I do when I get it?
Yeah. Yep. Yep. Yep.
Am I right in thinking I've been using referring students to the Office of Student Life as kind of a way of protecting the fairness within my course?
Okay.
Because I'm like, a lot of times students will reach out to me and like give me the whole spiel of their situation.
Sure.
And I say, okay, I understand if it's happening, please contact them. They can give you resources for
Yeah.
all of your classes.
Yeah.
Contact all of them.
Love it.
And I need to hear from them in order to provide X, Y, and Z.
Yeah. That sounds good. The one thing I would say is it's kind of those bigger things. So if a student reaches out, the example I use, maybe a bad one, is if a student reaches out and said, I had a dentist appointment on Thursday, we're not getting involved in that, right? Sometimes you schedule a dentist appointment and you lose your participation points, right? It's probably not going to make or break your grade. But the kind of those bigger things were like, this isn't just impacting my class. This is going to be hitting over here and wanting to use us for those bigger things because we're allowed to collect documentation. Not every office can. You're not supposed to keep the documentation, right? If a student comes in and says, here's my stuff, you should be like, okay, cool, go take it to Student Life. You can look at it, but don't collect it. So no, I think that's perfect. I like that. What else? Yeah.
So I have several students this semester that have sort of these ongoing, sort of very large issues happening.
Yeah.
And been in contact with you, I've gotten the letters from them, but there hasn't really been any sign of like a change
Okay.
in their behavior. I'm trying to work with them, but they're not really working back with me.
Okay.
Is that an instance where I need to like keep you guys updated? Like, hey, I got these letters. I've tried to work with the students.
Sure.
They're not working
Yes.
with us. Do you want that sort of like continuing?
Yeah, because I think our hope, and I say it's hope, because sometimes our office is the first stop on their like, it's gonna get better. And if it's not, like if that didn't work out, we wanna try to reach back out. Because we've got to, if you're getting a letter from us, outside of just a generic absence verification, if it's, here's a hint. If it's coming from Carolyn or our office account, that student came in, brought the doctor's note, and we just shot it out. If it's signed by one of us, that student sat down in our chair, okay? So respond back to that email, right? If you hit reply, it's gonna shoot back to me. It says Maxie and all this stuff, but it'll actually come back to me. So just hit reply and say, hey, I just want to update you, this student hasn't reconnected. Because here's the other thing that's happening. A student meets with us, they are getting a follow-up from us. A week or 2 weeks later, we're sending an email saying, hey, has it gotten better? Has that plan worked out? Sometimes they write back and say, yes, it's terrific. Sometimes it's communication silence. Most of the time it's communication silence. So then all of a sudden you send me something that says this is not going well, we're gonna basically re-trigger that student concern process. But they'll be getting emails directly from us then. Like I'm gonna say, hey, Susie, heard from your professor that you haven't been doing X, Y, Z. And that actually is really effective for students. They're gonna go, oh, there's like date, time, place. Like there's like this thing that happened and Dean Thompson knows about it. I better write back, right? So no, that's helpful. And then maybe it's like, okay, well, you need to withdraw, or you're going to get the F, or whatever that's going to look like. Or, yeah, this additional thing occurred. Okay, well, then maybe we re-engage with that. So yes, absolutely let us know. The more we know, the better, right? Don't be afraid to get us the information. Good, what other questions? We're good, okay. I got the thumbs up from the cameraman, so we're good. I appreciate you all coming. If I've said something and you have more questions or you want to chat afterwards, I'm available. Give me a call. I appreciate everything you all do because I could not do what you all do. That is not my world. So thank you so much for serving our students and helping our students, and thanks for coming today. I appreciate it.